Welcome to the VHIA Weekly Update number 5. My name is Stuart McCullough, I'm the CEO of VHIA. Starting this week with community health. The very first VHIA managers meeting for community health conducted by VHIA will occur on the 15th of February. With respect to the various agreements, there has been a lot of activity with regards to the Australian Services Union, the SACS agreement, with scheduled discussions to occur with a view to responding to the ASU's counter proposal. We've conducted brief preliminary meetings with both the HWU with regards to health and allied staff and VHIA with respect to the allied health professionals. In terms of the HWU, we are anticipating getting a modified log of claims within the next month, and we are still in preliminary discussions with VHIA, but keen to commence more detailed discussions shortly. In terms of our acute members, the Medical Scientists Agreement is now the subject of agreement in principle, subject to government approval. The process from now on will be with respect to drafting a replacement agreement. That means of the 5 agreements that we had to conclude last year, that 2 of them have been approved by the Commission, 1 is awaiting approval, 1 is out to ballot, and 1 is in the process of being drafted. With respect to the mental health agreement, that's the agreement that is presently out for ballot, and we will shortly start programming times for EBA forums for that agreement. With respect to doctors and maintenance, those agreements for 2017 are still in their early stages. There have been some preliminary meetings. The next period of activity, or the next thing to occur, will be a request to distribute the NERR with respect to those agreements. Concerning the Safe Patient Care Act, members will recall that there is a Safe Patient Care Act review or task force that has been established. The time frame for submissions for that task force has been extended from the 6th of February to the 16th of February. Shortly we'll be advising our regional members of dates for late March, in which we will conduct regional forums. Those will be a great opportunity to talk about agreement provisions in greater detail in a way that the earlier forums did not perhaps permit. We will be conducting forums twice a year, visiting different locations in each region, which means that you can expect to see us both in March and most likely September. But we'll be sending out some information shortly with respect to the dates for March. The other thing to advise all members is that the VHIA Community App is now available. The VHIA Community App is something that you can download. It's available both for Apple products and for Android. The Community App will operate in a way which enables us to communicate with you in a far more direct and efficient and immediate fashion than bulletins have previously allowed. It will enable us to provide short updates, even if we're at the Commission or somewhere else, and provide information in a very swift fashion. The other thing it will enable members to do is to select the information that they wish to receive. That's something that they'll be able to do by selecting the agreements that are of interest to them. They will then receive the feed that is relevant to that agreement. We'll be providing further information with regards to the use of the VHIA Community App shortly, and we look forward to being able to communicate better with members online. That's all for the industrial update of this week. For this week's discussion, I'm going to bring in Tim Nagle, Principal Industrial Consultant. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Stuart. Good to be here again.
Once again, we have the box of mystery. Last time you managed to malign a perfectly good soldier by referring to them as a ninja. This week I'll be interested to see what you make of the particular object. So would you just describe to those who are listening what it is you see?
I see a statue of someone that I don't recognise.
It's meant to be Fran's list, because today we're going to be talking about implementation issues for 2017 and working our way through that implementation list. In actual fact, it's a bust of Beethoven. I didn't have one of Fran's list, but given that you couldn't tell the difference between a soldier and a ninja, I didn't think that mattered so much.
Fair enough.
In terms of the process for implementation and the development of implementation guides, could you let people know just where those implementation guides are up to?
Yeah, so for the agreements that we've completed and are now in operation, so the Nurses and Midwives and also the Health and Allied Services and Management Administrative Officers, they both have implementation guides that are available on our website under supplementary information.
In terms of those guides, those are something that have been developed in consultation with the unions. That is, they're not just something that we've created, but something that we've done in close cooperation with the various unions.
Yeah, that's right. So, the purpose of those guides are really to try and bring both parties on the same page about what needs to happen to affect the implementation of the agreement. So, it's really important that both sides of the fence are on the same page in regards to what needs to occur, because that informs the workplace implementation committees and other sort of mechanisms.
My understanding with regards to the Health and Allied is that we're still in that consultation process with the union, but the nurses one is complete and up on the website, and the health professionals one I think is not too far away and is just being resolved or finalised now.
Oh yes, that's right.
And in terms of how people can use that implementation guide, you made a reference to the Agreement Implementation Committee before.
Yeah, so how I would see it happening is that, for instance, with the Nurses and Midwives, we know that the workplace implementation committees are an outworking of the agreement, and that's really to ensure that at a local level the agreements are appropriately implemented. And so therefore the implementation guide serves a perfect vehicle to enable that to occur, where both sides can see the list of what needs to occur and then check off as it occurs.
So effectively it will be a useful tool both with that at the workplace level but also at that implementation committee level as well.
That's right, yes.
So we've referred to implementation guides for those agreements that have been completed, that is the nurses, health and allied managers and administrative workers and the allied health professionals. We've still got some other agreements that are in the process of being finalised. That is, we have the mental health agreement, which is out to ballot currently, and we also have the medical scientists agreement, which has just concluded and reached agreement in principle. Will the objective be to have the same standard of implementation guide for each of those agreements?
Yeah, it will. So those agreements need to be implemented as well, so we'll be following the same process with both of those.
So the objective will be for us to have a consistent standard with regards to implementation guides and support for implementation.
Correct.
In terms of the items that are identified as key implementation issues, we recently circulated a list of key implementation issues that are relevant to each of the enterprise agreements that have been concluded. In terms of the process for developing the list of those identified issues, how was that done?
So it's really a consultative process with representatives from health services, so in particular the employee relations or industrial relations group. So really that was a process of, in collaboration with that group, identifying those areas that needed some additional work and some collaborative work and creating the list from there. So it's really got a lot of buy-in from health services about identifying those issues that we all say need some more collaborative work to implement.
So effectively these are either new provisions and people, how they apply those new provisions, or their amended entitlements. And really the objective, I guess, of that process of having implementation issues in a process is to develop more materials that employers can use to ensure that those entitlements are successfully implemented and can be implemented in a consistent fashion across the sector.
Yeah, really what we want out of that is consistency. What the feedback that we've received from health services is that consistency and the desire for consistency across the board. Also, the development of those implementation guides and the subsequent outworkings stops health services having to recreate wheels. So we know that people can leverage off the work done so that to save everyone time, basically. So time saving and also consistency is the two outcomes we're after.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing in that these are industry-wide agreements. and yet traditionally people have sometimes had to find their own way through the implementation process, meaning that the results can sometimes be a little bit different. And the process that we're seeking to move to is one whereby the support and the outcomes are applied consistently, consistent with it being an industry agreement.
Well, that's right. I mean, we don't want situations where one health service is doing it differently to another health service. I mean, really, we need consistency across the board. As you say, the same provisions that apply to each health service, so they should be implemented the same.
So the implementation issues for the Nurses and Midwives Agreement, for the Health and Allied Services, Managers and Administrative Workers and Allied Health Professionals Agreements, those lists of implementation issues have been completed. Have they been circulated?
So I think they're on the website. We were going to send them out once they'd all been completed, but we will send them out before then, I think.
In terms of accessing that material that's placed on the website, it's worth perhaps reminding members that they need their VHIA login in order to access that material.
Yeah, so if they need to go on the website through the firewall, I think it's called. I'm not sure. It's hard because I can't tell the difference between Ninja and
If it's not called firewall, it probably should be.
It should, yes. No, that's right. So it's protected behind that security feature.
And that password is also necessary if you are to access the app that we were talking about earlier, or if you are to access the video casts.
Yeah, so anything that links to the website, whether it's the frontal interface is the app or not, still goes through that firewall.
So if members have changes to their key personnel, that is either people leaving or people starting, we would ask that they notify VHIA in order for us to update our records and to ensure that we can facilitate access to those resources.
Yeah, that process is still the same, that's right.
In terms of the list of the implementation issues, I think one of the things that people should bear in mind is that by developing a list of implementation issues, that list is effectively the items that we'll be working on, but it's not intended to limit the matters that might arise or need attention in the implementation phase.
No, I mean, with anything, the implementation process is a learning process. So whilst the group may have identified certain matters as being the primary implementation issues for the agreement, that doesn't stop things popping up as people work through the implementation process.
So inevitably, items will arise during the life of any agreement, so the implementation issues list will probably will change along with it.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, it is a learning process, so what we want to be able to do is at the end of that say that we've implemented it consistently. So the identification of the issues or the timing of that identification doesn't really matter. The fact that it's identified and worked through is probably the key.
In terms of, we've identified the implementation issues, how are those issues then now going to be handled?
So we've got a general reference group for those issues that have been identified across the agreements. So there we've set some regular meeting dates for that group to come together. We had the first meeting today, which was great, and started the process of working through the family violence provision. So that sort of consultative mechanism will be how it goes.
It's probably worth just emphasising the fact that we've got the lists of implementation issues as they apply to individual agreements, but in addition to that we have some general implementation issues, and those are items that really reach across more than one agreement.
Yeah, that's right. Just as we say that health services don't need to create the wheel, each of those reference groups don't need to create the wheel where a particular implementation issue, such as family violence, reaches across different agreements.
And in terms of the composition of those, the various reference groups that we have for the individual agreements and the general reference groups, that's something that's also been circulated?
So that has been circulated previously. I'm just not 100% whether the general one has. I think it has. Yeah, but that's a circulated document as well.
From memory, it was part of the January HRIR update.
That's right.
That we had a list of the composition of those committees, bearing in mind that the composition of those committees will invariably will change, but it was just about making sure that people knew who were on the individual committees.
And really, we've put it back to the health services about who has the time or volunteer to participate in those committees. So look, we've been very fortunate in that health services have been very keen to be involved, which is great. So there's no shortage of volunteers to work through those processes, and I think that's a reflection upon the value they put on it.
It's worth emphasising though that people are still free to volunteer, so the fact that we've circulated a list of the participants on the various committees does not prevent somebody from volunteering to participate in that group.
No, and look, we expect that will change over time as different priorities come up.
I don't think we've ever had to turn anyone away from volunteering from one of our committees.
We're very fortunate.
So in terms of the next step with regards to the various reference groups and those lists for the individual agreements, the next step with regards to those reference groups, what would that step be?
Yeah, so we're in the process of establishing for all the agreements that have been completed the outworkings of those agreements, which includes a schedule for each of the reference groups. So we're in the process of doing that and also communicating with the reference groups that have helped us through the EBA process, seeking their ongoing involvement or delegation or however that may work. So that's the next step with the individual agreements. That's
something of a shift for us. So traditionally what we've had is reference groups that we disband at the end once the agreement comes into place. This time we're not going to do that. We're going to keep those reference groups active. It may well be that those reference groups decide to delegate some of the implementation issues to a subcommittee or to another group. It may well be that the reference groups seek some expert guidance on a particular matter, and it may well be that certain health services have developed expertise in a particular area and participate in a reference group for a period of time on that area of their interest.
Well, we've seen that with the women's and the great work that they've done in family violence, haven't we, that people can learn from. In terms of those reference groups, we expect that, I mean, in the past, if we stopped them at the time that the EBA is finalised, we're missing some crucial steps, not only the implementation process, but all the evaluation process that leads into the next EBA. So we're hoping to, by maintaining those groups, to complete that circle.
So we talked about the fact that we've established our friends lists. We've also maintained our reference groups. Probably the key question is why go to all that effort? What is it that we're seeking to achieve by taking that different process?
Well, it's really about continuous improvement, isn't it? It's about that the EBAs are cycles. The negotiation of the agreement is but one stage of that cycle. So the implementation and the evaluation that needs to occur during the life of the agreement is all part of trying to create better agreements moving forward.
I think it's also that issue of how do we generate materials that support implementation. So we can avoid a circumstance where one of our members has a new provision that they need to implement and that they're left to figure it out by themselves. Through these implementation committees, we'll be in a position to produce materials, have discussions with stakeholders, including unions if necessary, to provide further implementation information that will support the successful implementation of the clauses.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that that there's a real thirst for that sort of guiding information that we can create through those processes.
For me, it's one of the central lessons that comes out of both the Travis Review and the Duckett Report, in that there are some times where we are individual devolved health services. There are some times that we are an industry. And these sort of activities are really designed to ensure that we're acting as an industry.
Yes, I agree.
It's probably also worth reminding people that we also have the SDPPWG to contend with. It might be worth reminding some of those people who are listening what the SDPPWG is.
Yeah, so the SDPWG is really the working group that looks at implementing the service delivery partnership plans. So it's a group comprised of both employers and also the unions, and VHIA being the representative of the employers. And it's really established to implement the service delivery partnership plan.
So with respect to those working groups, that's the Service Delivery Partnership Plan Working Group, and that tripartite discussion between ourselves, the relevant union and the department. I think the clauses each provide that they need to commence within 6 months of the agreement coming into operation, but we've already extended the invitation to a number of unions to start setting dates for 2017 for those meetings.
Yes, I mean, like everyone, the calendar fills up pretty quickly, so it's a shared view that we need to get those dates locked in as soon as possible.
There is a little bit of a notorious history with regards to our agreements and the things that we say will occur during their life and whether or not those things actually get around to happening.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the heat of the moment, there's good intentions, but this is really about making sure that those things happen. Because at the end of the day, these things are things that are going to benefit both employers and employees as well. So it's important work, and I think it will deliver some positive outcomes for everyone.
So I'd like to talk about the general implementation issues. I think we'll use later broadcasts to focus on the individual agreements, but it's worth starting with those issues that reach across the various agreements. So we talked about the fact that a general implementation list has been created, and that there is a general implementation committee. It's worth saying to members that we are still seeking some volunteers from rural and regional members to participate in that committee to ensure that we have a good representation of the membership.
That's right. So, I mean, there's a diversity of circumstances across our metropolitan, regional and rural members, so it's important that we pick up each unique perspective and context.
So one of those general implementation items is with respect to family violence. There's a new clause, and that clause is consistent across each of the agreements. But there is a requirement under that provision for the development of a supporting guide.
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of the new family violence provision, it is very new for the field, and it has a lot of nuances in it that need to be worked through. I know that we had the discussion today with the first meeting of the overarching implementation committee, and it was great discussion about the nuances within the clause and how it may be implemented.
So we started that discussion with a video cast back in December, which was conducted at the Royal Women's Hospital, and with them sharing their experiences in terms of their development of policies around that issue of family violence.
Yeah, and I think it's a great springboard for the rest of the industry to leverage off. I mean, some of the work that they've done in the area is great and leads us into the meeting obligations under the agreement as well.
So in December we participated or facilitated a session at the Royal Women's Hospital with regards to the work that they had done developing their policy framework around family violence, and one of the reasons for doing that is a recognition that members have developed expertise in this area, both at the Women's, also at Bendigo Health, at places like Benalla Health and a range of other members. And I think one of the key tasks for us is to see is to facilitate the sharing of that good work where it's appropriate to do so.
Oh, I agree, that's right. And one of the learnings for me is the degree that putting people in a room with expertise and a real focus on topics such as family violence, it hastens the development of these things remarkably.
So when we met with the group today, we had prepared a discussion paper in advance and then worked our way through that discussion paper as a way of facilitating, I guess, and canvassing all the issues that arise from the clause, with the objective of really developing either the guide or the principles for a guide that is required by that clause.
That's right, yes. And I think that, I mean, there was, just speaking as a participant in that meeting, there was some great dialogue, great thinking, great discussion that occurred through the process, and that will all lead into a guideline that's going to be better if one health service sitting down and developing it.
So the task for us will be, following that meeting, will be to do a draft, to take back to that committee, and then to consult with members with regards to that guideline or the principles, including those small rural health services, to ensure that whatever it is that we produce is useful to that group.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
In terms of some of the other items on our general implementation list, the workplace bullying. Most of the agreements don't have a specific workplace bullying clause, but most of them do have an occupational health and safety provision.
Yes, and the health and safety provision looks at bullying as an area that needs more attention across health services.
Look, and it's certainly a high-profile issue, and from our perspective, I think there's something of a gap. Whereas it's a high-profile issue, and there's an expectation that members have best practice policies. There has not yet been a consensus as to what best practice might be. And I think one of the roles for that committee will be to work with members to bring together a sense of what policies should include in order to get to best practice.
That's right, yes.
In terms of the other items that we have on our list of things to do, there are the common clauses, which are the termination of employment provisions, the consultation provisions, as well as the union matters and a few other items. I think it's been an interesting experience trying to develop greater commonality across the agreements.
It's been a challenge across the different negotiation context to try and get that consistency. We haven't got 100% consistency, unfortunately, but we've got a lot closer than we were previously.
It's interesting to the extent to which, as a group across all the agreements, how difficult it is to achieve consensus, and that we're not really used to achieving consensus across important issues.
That's right. It's a different mindset, I think.
I think if you bring it back to those Duckett and Travis principles, there's a lesson in there for those of us engaged in industrial relations to not engage in unnecessary siloing of particular provisions, particularly when it comes to process, and looking for opportunities to be more consistent both within a health service and across health services.
Yeah, that's right. So things like family violence, things like consultancy, we're really looking at best practice, aren't we, and what's going to be most efficient for health services and employees.
We did get some feedback with regards to the common clauses and their development, and one of the reasons for including it as part of the ongoing reference group is to make sure that we have an appropriate mechanism for consulting closely with members in terms of both identifying common clauses or clauses that should or could be common across agreements and ensuring that they meet the expectations of members.
That's right. I mean, at the end of the day, these clauses are designed to do a particular job, so we need to make sure that throughout the life of the agreement an appropriate evaluation process occurs to make sure they're meeting the objectives that we want them to meet.
Also on the list of the general implementation issues is casual conversion, which always has a kind of road to Damascus kind of connotation to it. Again, that's another example of a new provision under the agreements. Similar principles, but not quite the same clauses.
Yeah, so this is reflective of our pursuit of permanent employment, but it is a new clause, and it's a new approach to an issue that's been around a long time. But it will, like anything, have implementation issues attached to it. So again, that objective of trying to get consistency across the implementation process is crucial for us.
There are some agreements that have fit for work provisions. Again, new provisions for those clauses, although the principles aren't necessarily new.
No, I mean, they're existing common law principles that everyone's been abiding by, but this provides a framework so that we can get more consistency, so we can get more predictability around the process. And that benefits both employees and employers in that making sure that everyone knows that the process we're going to be following is transparent and it's going to be reasonable and fair.
So one of the other items that has sort of emerged, and indeed I think it'll be something of an early priority, concerns requests for flexible work arrangements. Requests for flexible work arrangements and the right to do so is nothing new, but it has emerged that there are, for example, I think members have reported the use of templates obtained from government agencies potentially.
I think there's yes. So I believe that they've been using an ombudsman template to request the flexible work arrangements, and the feedback that we're getting is that there's a significant increase in the number of applications being made. So it is, whilst a long-standing entitlement for employees, something that is being taken up more frequently.
It's really interesting under the Act and also under the agreements that they focus on the fact of the right to make the request and the obligations in considering the request and refusing. What they don't really tell employers is how best to engage with employees in terms of trying to accommodate the need, whilst even if they can't accommodate the precise nature of the request.
Yeah, it's more about sort of outlining the process, but still there's that sort of human interaction that needs to occur and problem-solving process.
So I think one of the useful things for the General Implementation Committee will be to turn its mind to that procedural aspect, because that seems to be where the gap is.
That's right.
We've also got things such as occupational violence. There are some obligations with regards to committees and some work to be done there, as well as transition to retirement. Again, another new provision.
That's right. So this is a new provision for the agreements. Not a new topic, of course, but a new provision for the agreements.
And I think payment on termination was also an issue that was consistently raised, and particularly how the obligations under the Act interact with things such as the finalisation of salary packaging.
Yeah, so this is a good example of where the evaluation of the last agreement and some of the problems that arose throughout the life of the agreement has led to changes in subsequent agreements.
And I think the final matter on our top 10 list was with regards to the SDPP. There is some commonality across the service delivery partnership plans, but also some provisions are unique to the individual agreements.
Yeah, so I mean, different agreements will always have different circumstances. For instance, the mental health agreement talks about the 10-year mental health plan and facilitating the implementation of that. So that's not there for the other agreement. So whilst they, broadly speaking, are similar, they do have some slight nuances between them.
I think the objective of these processes that we're embarking on is to ensure that we're using the time between agreements as effectively as possible, to get away a little bit from that boom and bust cycle that is sometimes so much a part of EBAs, as a way of ensuring that we support the implementation of the provisions, but I think that those committees and those ongoing processes will be useful just in terms of knowing what works well under the agreements and what doesn't.
And look, we should be, part of the process is to identify what's working well and build upon that, and what's not working well and trying to fix it. That's the process in a nutshell.
So the early part of our work with regards to these committees will be to develop a list of priorities and action plans so that we can report back on those, not only to the committees but to the membership more broadly.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you, Stuart.